Let's just bow our heads and we'll have a moment of prayer. Our Father in heaven, as we just come at this time to thank you for the opportunities that we have in this country where we can worship in freedom, we can fellowship in freedom, and we have the opportunity, Lord, of being able to study your word openly. We thank you for that. Many people don't have that. We look forward to the time when there will be greater freedom in the world, and I guess ultimately the greatest freedom will come when Jesus returns again. We look forward to that event. Today, as we just spend a little time in our Sabbath school, I pray that you would guide and direct in our thoughts and what we are looking at, that again we may just understand a little bit more about walking in the footsteps of Jesus. And I just simply pray that we will be more attuned to the land in which Jesus lived. For these things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Folks, our series, which we've started about, as I said, once a month, I can't keep up with the lesson pamphlet. We've been sort of jumping over some places, but because next quarter is on the Gospel of Matthew, we'll be able to come back and fill in some of the gaps throughout Palestine. But I've tried to pick it up again today, where our pamphlet started on the Mount of Olives and up into the temple, and just to give you a visual background of what that would have been like for Jesus in his time. So we go to Jerusalem, and we have a look at what happened here in Jerusalem and what did Jesus do and how does that impact it. That's really the discussion of the lesson. But let's have a visual look. By the way, I must admit, I actually felt somewhat, what's the word I'm looking for here? Watching the news this week and seeing what's happening in the Middle East, what is happening to Israel in response to what they've been doing to their neighbours. And you might say, well, that was in response to what their neighbours did to them. But the payback system as it's going on, I kind of felt, oh, this is almost treading on sacred ground here. Should we wait till this all passes until we get a more peaceful setting to be able to talk about some of these very places that possibly this week you will see have been hit by a missile or something like that. It's a little bit it's shattered me a little bit, but I hope that it'll come good. Okay, so we're going to Jerusalem. And the first thing I'd like to note in going to Jerusalem, that just jumped a couple of pictures there, I'll go back to here, is as I mentioned, this week our pamphlet actually starts at Mount of Olives. Now, really, at the Mount of Olives, which is only about 2 kilometres away from the old walled city of Jerusalem, across a valley, and there it is up on this hillside, there's really not a lot there to see to connect with the story of Jesus. The township is just like any other suburb in that particular area. It's particularly strongly Islam. I did get a photograph of a donkey and a little lad. I had to pay him a shekel for it. But we got a photo of a donkey because this is where Jesus left, according to our pamphlet, the Mount of Olives, riding on a donkey, heading down into Jerusalem. However, the thing that the Mount of Olives is known for, there is a great lookout across the Kidron Valley, 2 kilometres away and this is a telephoto lens to get this photo, but across the Kidron Valley into the old city of Jerusalem and then looking right out over the new city of Jerusalem as well. It is a great, spectacular place to go. And so obviously every time we go travelling with a group, this is the Atzim group in 2005, they love to pose here in front of a background, the Mount of Olives. And even better in 2016 when I went with some of the teachers, and 4 of them are from our school here, actually. But it was a clearer day, beautiful looking out over the Mount of Olives. And you can see there, notice the walled city going along here. That's the old city. And I'll just talk a little bit about the old city as we go along. As I widen the picture a bit, you'll notice that, okay, the wall goes off to the right, but it also comes back here, up this way, around here, and right around the back, and that's what's known as the old city of Jerusalem, the biblical city. Not quite the biblical city, you'll see a little bit later on. And if you look further down to the left, it's interesting to notice all those white blocks there in the foreground are actually gravestones. All right, and they belong to the Jewish quarter. The Islamic quarter, you'll see in a moment, is up by the wall. All right, let's keep moving along, and I keep going from the wrong button. So we're going to head down the Kidron Valley, because this is where Jesus would have gone on the donkey in his approach to Jerusalem for his triumphal entry. And as we go, the first thing we notice again is these tombstones, or the graves. These are of the Jewish people, and a fascinating little habit they have. They don't leave flowers on the gravesite. When they visit, guess what they leave? They leave stones. And if you look closely, those of you at the front will see this a little better. See on this bottom picture here, that particular tombstone there, it's covered with probably 40, 50 at least stones. And many of these other ones also have stones sitting on them. Somebody's been there and visited. So that's their little sign for that. And then we go down into what's known as right down by the Gethsemane. And there's a couple of churches there that become particularly significant. The Christian church love to build churches on sacred sites. And so we work our way around them. But really it's Gethsemane. Now, probably Jesus didn't stop into the Garden of Gethsemane on his triumphal entry ride going down the hill, all right? But he's going to be there in a few days' time, so I thought I'd put Gethsemane in as well. It is incredible to believe that those olive trees there, and they're still around, they're in there's dozens of them actually, just centuries old. Now, we know that they are not centuries old to take us right back to Jesus' time, because just 40 years after Jesus, Titus made sure there wasn't a tree left on any hillside anywhere around Jerusalem. So they all were cut down. But some people have suggested that the current olive trees that are centuries old may have been from shoots from the original trees that were there, because they say an olive tree never dies. So one historian has actually made a comment to that effect. All right, let's move on. From there, oops, got to get rid of that, sorry. From there, are we going? Yes, we are going, that's better. These steps are the steps that go up the side of the old city of Jerusalem, and they lead from Gethsemane and they go up to Caiaphas' house. Now, this is not the same direction that Jesus would have gone on the triumphal entry. But before the week is out, this week while you're studying the lesson, Jesus will have ascended these steps. Our guide actually told us that these steps actually date back to the 1st century. Quite incredible, isn't it? And that Jesus would have climbed these steps going up into Jerusalem there after that encounter. What we do know, and this is from, again, it's the Christian tradition shares this with us, and it says that Jesus went right down the Kidron Valley, and then he came back up on the other shoulder, on the other side of the valley, and he came in through, and you'll notice that the yellow arrow there is pointing to the wall where it is known as the Golden Gate, all right? And the Golden Gate got all boarded up long ago, actually. In fact, about 500 years ago, Solomon the Great, when he did the last building of the walls in the city of Jerusalem, he made sure that these walls were boarded up. Now, did he do that because he just wanted to have another entry into the city covered so that it was better protected? Or did he do it because he didn't want the Jews who said, this gate will be the gate that the Messiah will come through, coming into Jerusalem in the future? Now, in this case, the Messiah has come. The first time he goes right here through the Golden Gate when it was opened way back in his time, and it was probably an earlier Golden Gate than what we're looking at now, but that happened way back there many years ago. All right, so when Jesus gets into Jerusalem, he's on what's known as the Temple Mount. Now, when we have a look at the Temple Mount, for example, no, not here, you'll see it right there. Notice, for example, right over here, that on the Temple Mount, in the centrepiece, is actually the Dome of the Rock, a Muslim shrine. And that Dome of the Rock has been sitting there for over 500 years. And more than that. It's over 1,000 years. It goes right back to about the end of the 7th century was when the Dome of the Rock was built. And that was at the end of the century after Islam began at Mecca about 100 years earlier. And now the Dome of the Rock was seen as being so sacred because Muhammad was supposed to have ascended back to heaven from the Dome of the Rock. So you can see why, when now the Islam faith has control of the Middle East, they've taken the holy site where the temple once stood, and they have their shrine for people to actually share into that. And so to actually understand a little bit like what the temple was like, we're going to go to a model of the temple, and actually that one there first. And this model, it's in a 1:50 ratio. It's there in one of the suburbs of Jerusalem, and it's how Jerusalem would have looked in the 1st century. It's called Herod's Jerusalem. And that would have included what you see there in the foreground, obviously with the temple and the courtyard, etc. And look, just have a quick look at some of these photos here of these 1:50 ratio model. It's really quite amazing, and you get a fairly good visual picture of what Jerusalem might have been like at that particular time. But it's this what we want to have a look at. The major feature here, the rectangular shape, is covering equivalently what today is known as the Temple Mount. All right? And right in the middle of that Temple Mount, and by the way, that was all known as the outer courtyard that you can see there. And when we have this week been talking in our pamphlet about Jesus coming to the temple and cleansing the temple, the selling of the animals and all of that was taking place out here in the courtyards, all right? There was space assigned for that. There were people there assigned for exchanging money and to get temple shekels, etc. But what Jesus was upset about wasn't that they were doing it there at the temple, at a place where they were allowed to do it, but it was the shonky way it was all going on and how people were extortioning. Extortioning? That's probably not a good word. It was extortion at its worst because those people were being ripped off at high rates of exchange. To exchange money for a temple shekel or to buy an animal for sacrifice, etc. And it was because of that Jesus was really getting upset. So that might be something you want to have a look at. However, did Jesus go into the actual the building itself? Well, not the main sanctuary, because only the priests went into there. But yes, he would have gone into this, which is kind of a representation. By the way, this is, remember, Herod's. This is the 3rd time that temple has been revived and brought back to a life state. And so we find that when Jesus came here, and I'm going to go, you can kind of see the different parts of it. Obviously, there's a wall going across here, out in this courtyard, which is known as the courtyard of the women. There are storerooms on each corner. But let me go to one of the Bible dictionaries I have at home. It has a plan of this. So here is the main tabernacle, the most holy place, the porch leading up to it. Out here, this is what was known as the courtyard in the tabernacle, the Old Testament tent tabernacle. There's the altar, there's the laver, and there are slaughtering places here for people to slaughter their animals before they were sacrificed. So this is the area of the priests, this area here. But obviously, this is called the area of the Israelites. The men could bring their animal sacrifices here, and then with the priest, the sacrifice was made and put on the altar, and so it would go. Out here, the courtyard of the women. They weren't allowed in there, nor were the Gentiles. They were only allowed outside in the outer court where the animals were being sold, etc., etc. They weren't allowed in here at all. And then you can see storerooms, like oil and wine was stored in that one, wood is stored in this one, and so it goes. These rooms back here were used by the priests for the storing of temple vessels, etc., etc. So Jesus would have come in here. He would have also probably come in here, if not to have a look. We have no record of him making a sacrifice, obviously, himself, but no doubt he was able to come into this part during his ministry. So that's just to put you into a little bit of a context there to see what was happening in the time of Jesus when he came to the temple and was just moving around, walking around here with the people. And I think at that stage the time has come, and I'm going to be true. Well, the time has definitely come, because now my computer won't even go forward. Try that button. Yes, it did. So it's definitely come. So this is where we're going to start next time. A lovely aerial view, and you can see again the temple. This is what's known as the Temple Mount here, the highest point of the old city. And we'll come back to that next time and just have a look at further things and that happened here with Jesus, and what was continuing to happen in the years that followed later as well. So I hope that's given you a bit of a visual concept, because that's what I'm trying to do with this time, is just allow us to visualise a little bit more what it was like for Jesus and the disciples and those other early Christians in the context at the moment of Jerusalem. Jerusalem has probably many sessions if we wanted to let it happen, because there's a lot of things in Jerusalem that we can identify and connect with the story of Jesus now. And we can really say thanks to probably Constantine when he legalised Christianity, and his mother was responsible for building churches over these sacred sites. And that's preserved them for our identification as well. So we'll come back to that in our next step.